You are listening to TMI for the week of November 26th, 2018.
The scientists that are responsible for this, stop me if you've heard this, absolutely detest, despise the Hollywood-style name that they have, the media have gone on to describe it. They describe it as the mini brain. Have you heard about this week?
No.
Well, scientists are calling it an organoid. So, and it's a 3D structure, or quote unquote organ buds. And they are lab grown bundles of cells that resemble an organ and are used to study human development, to test out drugs, and understand disease using sophisticated tissue culture techniques. And so far, they've been able to grow many livers, many hearts, and parts of the intestine. But now, hang on to your hats, kids, but now, researchers have successfully grown miniaturized versions of the brain. And they behave like the real thing, offering scientists the rare opportunity to study the functional human brain tissue. So not only are these human cortical spheroids display remarkable similarity to the structure and organization of the human cerebral cortex, the region is also responsible for higher order functions like language, thinking, perceiving, and information processing. And they also possess working neurons capable of transmitting signals to one another. How do you like them apples? So what do you think's going to happen with that piece of technology, my friend?
RoboCop.
Hal, please don't open the outer bay door. Hal, what are you doing? I'm sorry, Dave. I have no choice.
It didn't seem like there was anything biological about Hal. He seemed to be a pretty hardcore, you pull his drives and he shuts down. Daisy, Daisy.
I hear you, but I mean, I 100 years from now, it'd be fascinating to see how far they've gone in that research. I mean, one of the things that they've said, and it'd be interesting with respect to human rights. I mean, how do you describe an individual or a human being? Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of ethical questions that all of a sudden come into play. And if you say that the personality, the human person, is in the brain, this organoid, even though it's the size of a pea, or if I read it correctly, gives brain waves when they set it up to an MRI, or not an MRI, but an electrocephalograph. You can say it.
Electrocephalograph.
Snuffleupagus. So now all of a sudden, so what does that mean right there? So can you just flush this little organoid down the toilet now that it's
I think that's the least of our ethical problems with this.
No, but I mean, it is. I mean, as soon as you decide, I mean, this is what we were talking about last week. As soon as you take away the rights of some person, you're now determining whether or not that person has any rights whatsoever, even though they identify as,
I was channel surfing on Amazon Prime, and
we're not sponsored by Amazon Prime.
Registered trademark of Bezos. But I stumbled across an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. I can't remember the name of it, which is perfect for the show. And it's about him being cloned. And he comes home, and there he is, cloned. Yeah. Do you remember that one?
I do recall that one. That one was, darn it.
I didn't watch the rest of it. I didn't make it the way through it. But, but in a brief moment, we had to look at the issue of which one is the real one, and does the feelings of the clone matter? So, But I'm more worried that it's going to be used the first way we use emerging technologies, which is in weapons, so that this little pellet-sized brain will be making decisions about which wedding party to sidewinder missile.
Well, I mean that's it, eh? I mean it's what's remarkable about this whole thing is that right off the bat, or wherever they are in their research right now, they're saying that functional tests have revealed that 80% of the neurons in the spheroids could fire signals when stimulated, and 86% participated in network activity and displayed spontaneous activity similar to what we see when we observe the brain. Once once these things have been given the proper environment, they just seem to take off, and without any other external stimulation. So does that mean all of a sudden now we're dealing with another? Well, I mean, essentially, from my simplistic perspective, you're dealing with a human in a petri dish.
So you're worried that we're going to have automated podcasts?
Maybe in 100 years from now,
we'll be out of a job.
Yeah. We'll be like in Futurama. We'll be the brains in the jar.
Well, there's that Star Trek episode where there's multicolored brains and jars.
Yeah, there is. Yes.
I wager 3 Quaaludes.
Well, I seem to be out of Quaaludes, but I have some Sarvarian StarTech that I can donate. So, according to everybody involved, there's a feature on the new 737 MAX 800, a feature that pilots in WestJet and other airlines were unaware that even existed. There is a setting on there on the plane that, wish I had highlighted this, controlling the aircraft and the speed. And apparently there's an auto control setting that pilots haven't been trained on, and it's called an anti-stall system. And they're supposed to increase their speed or whatever it is in a manual setting. And apparently the pilots, nobody has been taught how to use this feature. And so this is why they've been having problems with this aircraft. So I'm just wondering, what the hell's going on?
So it's an anti-stall setting, but you have to manually change the thrust?
Well, if I understand this correctly, yeah. So I'll just read it to you. WestJet Airlines says it is updating its training in response to revelation of a design issue in the Boeing 737 MAX, the aircraft at the center of a deadly crash off the coast of Indonesia after taking off from the Indonesian capital of Jakarta, killing all 189 people on board. Moments earlier, the pilot had requested permission to return to the airport because of a problem controlling the plane. WestJet, which has 10 737 MAX aircraft in its fleet, said it is working with Transport Canada and other airlines over the past few weeks to revise its flight manual and increase training on part of the anti-stall system, a feature that pilots at WestJet and other airlines unaware that it even existed.
Well, that's the confusing part of the story. So it sounds like they deployed that on their approach to their second attempt, and that he didn't know that he had to add thrust. And that's what it sounds like. But then you end the story by saying nobody was aware it existed.
Yep.
So nobody was aware the anti-stall system existed, or nobody was aware that the need for you to add manual thrust was known?
Yeah, that's where it's ambiguous. There's really not a... There's no clarification. I'm just...
Somebody's getting sued.
Yeah, I'm just amazed that in this day and age with check, double check, triple check, quadruple check, that, cue the crickets. Like, what the hell is going on here?
In Michael Avenatti news...
in the loser news out of the States... Yeah.
Now, when we talked about this last week, you pointed out that it could just be a campaign to discredit him. I mean...
Oh, I know.
So, okay. Yeah. Well, hoping for the best. Maybe
this is the United States we're talking about. American exceptionalism.
He says by tweet earlier this week, I look forward to a full clearing of my name and disclosure of all the facts. I have never abused a woman or committed domestic violence against anyone. Any claim to the contrary is completely bogus and fabricated. I am a target, and I will be exonerated.
Sounds like the script from the playbook that all politicians use, or anybody who's been caught under the media spotlight. Okay. Kind of like Bela Lugosi when the spotlight's put on him and he kind of like hunches to one side and he has his hand in front of his face, you know?
All right.
I will be exonerated. I will be found guilty or innocent.
A cynical view of Michael Avenatti, our hero.
I have no heroes.
Yeah.
Cue the crickets. So we move from Michael Avenatti and south of the 49th to Playing It Safe was this article. It was in the travel section. I thought this was kind of interesting. So I think Chicago alone had over 800 murders last year, just in the city of Chicago alone. So anybody who's interested in traveling to a safer environment, and this podcast is not sponsored by the Tourist Commission of Iceland. Iceland only had 6 recorded homicides since the year 2000. I know Ottawa just had 17 as of yesterday. So anybody who is interested in traveling, winter, summer, spring, or fall, Iceland seems the place to be. UAE, Singapore were deemed extremely safe, and the most violent, and at the bottom of the list, were South Africa, Turkey, Thailand, India, and my favorite place, Mexico. Topping the list, well, obviously was Iceland, followed by the United Arab Emirates, as I mentioned before, Singapore, Spain, and Australia. So, and then Canada, well, where did Canada come in there? 6th. There we go. We made number 6. We're in the top 10. So congratulations, Canada. Nothing in there was there anything about the United States. So flushing sound, please. Over to you, Dave.
I guess this is rehashing the hashed.
Is that who hash?
So if you want to pick up a base, you look at the bell curve. In the case of conservatives, stupid people have things in common. All you have to do is appeal to stupid people. And bang, there is your guaranteed 35% base. So how would you appeal to stupid people? Say stupid things. And what has Trump done every single day?
Fear. It's all about fear.
I think it's about saying stupid things, because stupid things appeal to stupid people.
I agree.
And so then all of a sudden you pick up that whole, some 35% of the population who's stupid. Anyway, I guess there's...
No, it's agreed. I agree. Yeah, no, it's something that we've been discussing on and off for the last 2 years, and it seems almost every podcast. You can certainly see why, psychologically speaking, why divorce happens. Because after a while, you just end up rolling your eyes every time you hear something south of the 49th or anywhere else in the world with respect to extremists or conservatives or liberals or people abdicating their responsibility, whether it be corporate citizens or just plain citizens or government.
So the week started off, and we got a view into how Trump feels about those who have served.
Yeah.
I know more about ISIS than the generals do.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured.
Mr. Sensitive is off to a rolling start. Trump gives an interview earlier this week attacking McRaven, the retired admiral, for criticizing Trump's view of the free press.
He's a Hillary Clinton backer and an Obama backer. And frankly,
he's a Navy SEAL.
Wouldn't it have been nice if we got Osama bin Laden a lot sooner than that? Wouldn't it have been nice?
Yeah.
The interview continues.
SEAL, 37 years, former head of U.S. Special Operations.
Hillary Clinton fan.
Special Operations.
Excuse me, Hillary Clinton fan.
Who led the operations, commanded the operations that took down Saddam Hussein and that killed Osama bin Laden, says that your sentiment is the greatest threat to democracy in his lifetime.
He's a Hillary Clinton backer and an Obama backer. And frankly,
he was a Navy SEAL.
Wouldn't it have been nice if we got Osama bin Laden a lot sooner than that? Wouldn't it have been nice? You know, think of this. Living in Pakistan, beautifully in Pakistan, in what I guess they considered a nice mansion. I don't know, I've seen nicer.
He doesn't like the rain, so instead he called.
Have done that. I was extremely busy on calls for the country. We did a lot of calling, as you know.
He loves the military.
There's nobody that loves the military like I do. I love the military.
I don't think anybody's been more with the military than I have.
Ever.
So when does the wall go up between Canada and the United States?
Yeah. Trump served, but in his own way.
Now, getting back to dating, right? And when you got to say to a woman, hey, listen, you got to go to my personal doctor, and I'm going to have you checked out. Is that a tough thing to say to a woman, or you just got the balls to say it?
You know, I'll tell you, it's amazing. I can't even believe it. I've been so lucky,
right,
in terms of that whole world.
You've never gotten a social disease.
It is a dangerous world out there. It's
it is.
Scary. It's like Vietnam, sort of like, you know, the Vietnam era.
It is your personal Vietnam, isn't it?
It is my personal
It is. You've
Vietnam.
said that many
I feel
times.
like a great and very brave soldier.
Oh, it's just getting warm. He served in his own way. Senator Blumenthal has been making the rounds talking about what might be in the works when Congress reconvenes. Senator Blumenthal discusses the temporary assistant acting attorney general.
Matt Whitaker lacks the key qualification, which is approval by the Senate. He's depriving us of doing our job. He's depriving the American people of a system of checks and balances, which is designed precisely to protect against this kind of unqualified nominee.
Will Whitaker obstruct the Mueller investigation?
That's exactly the kind of question that needs to be answered in a Senate hearing, in a vote, in meetings with Whitaker. That's the process that takes place when the Senate advises and consents. You know, Alexander Hamilton warned that the president might appoint people of such insignificance and pliancy that they would become mere obsequious instruments of his pleasure. This man is an instrument of Donald Trump in doing his bidding in a slow-motion Saturday Night Massacre, cutting funds, cutting authority, and that's what we need to determine in the United States Senate if there were advice and consent.
One role of the Senate is to give advice and consent.
Deprives us of our right to vote. Each of us, as senators, was elected by our people in our state to vote on advising and consenting. And there's a larger issue also than just our being injured because we're deprived of the right to do our job. It's also a check and balance, which the founders envisioned to apply in exactly this kind of case, where the president appoints someone who is unfit, who lacks qualifications to do the job. And Alexander Hamilton said it on behalf of the founders. They wanted to prevent the president from appointing people who were of such insignificance and pliancy as to render them obsequious instruments of his pleasure. And that's Matt Whitaker, an instrument of the president's pleasure, known as his eyes and ears in the Department of Justice, even when he worked for Jeff Sessions, someone who's called the special counsel investigation a hoax and provided a roadmap for essentially how to strangle it. And so there's an immense practical significance and harm to us in our inability to advise and consent, to hold hearings, and say whether we approve of this nominee or not.
The problem with Whitaker is he's prejudiced his impartiality.
Mm-hmm. Matt Whitaker has provided a kind of roadmap for what he thinks should be done to the special counsel investigation, namely a kind of death by 1,000 cuts. Cuts in funding, cuts in authority, cuts in declining subpoenas or indictments. All of those actions may have been proceeding. You're absolutely right. We have no real view into what's happening in this investigation. And that is precisely why we want the courts to rule quickly, because Congress is going to be out of town and then out of session. And there'll be no check and balance unless Rod Rosenstein continues to be in charge of this investigation. And here's the other point, that Matt Whitaker is really unqualified for this job by virtue of what he said in the past.
You said he would never pass the advice and consent test, meaning if he had come before the Senate, he never would have been confirmed.
Speaking on Rachel Maddow, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then there was still a chance to comment on the wildfires in California.
Where the fire was right over there, and they're raking trees, little trees like this that are not trees, little bushes that you could see are totally dry. Weeds. And they're raking them. They're on fire.
He's senile.
Certainly sounds senile.
It's just senility.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people were talking about in his first few months in office. And then he had his crazy doctors give him a clean bill of health, and we stopped talking about that.
Well, those crazy doctors reminded me of Nick Riviera from The Simpsons, and the one line that Nick Riviera said, and I think it was something like this. Oh, this is what successful post-op looks like. I nearly fell out of my chair just laughing when I was watching it. He walks in with Hibbert, and I think Homer's in, a body cast or something like that. And I think that was the same doctor that Trump has on call at the White House, Oh, hello there, President Trump. Okay. Time for your vitamin injection.
Here's your bag of pills. A contested vote race still remains. Republican Senate seat runoff, as neither of the two parties got more than 50%. Mm-hmm. Republican Cindy Clyde Smith versus Democrat Mike Apsley. Earlier this week, just about a day before a debate, here's his opponent.
I put out a statement yesterday, and we stand by that statement.
Could you expand on it then, why you said it, what you meant by it, and why people in the state should not see it as offensive?
We put out the statement yesterday, and it's available, and we stand by that statement.
Senator, are you familiar with Mississippi's history of lynchings?
I put out a statement yesterday, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Governor, you mentioned that it shouldn't be viewed with a negative connotation. Could you at least explain
I put out a statement yesterday, and we stand by the statement, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Is that phrasing in your everyday lingo, in your vocabulary? Do you use that phrase?
I put out a statement yesterday.
It sounds like it's going to be a lively debate.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're going to issue a statement like that, just issue it as a media release and just don't even go up to the mic to take answers or give a statement, because if you just sound like a broken record when you keep on, this is what I said yesterday and I have nothing else to say. Well, then why the hell are you on the stage in front of the podium to begin with? Just release it in an email. And that's all you got to say, instead of saying, I just said that, I'm not going to say anything else. Really,
she's
come on.
Doing an impression of Huckabee Sanders.
Yeah, well, that's what it was. I issued that statement yesterday. I have nothing further to say on that.
Trump's daughter now has an email scandal of her own. And so we flash back to...
Is this still a family show? Right, we flash back to...
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail.
Which reminds me of...
Lock her up. Lock her up. Lock her up.
Which reminds me of...
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
Comrade. Hello. I have found your 30,000 emails that you're missing, comrade. Please come and pay us a visit right now to our embassy, where a group of men will be there to help you with your search inquiry.
Halfway through the week, I think he got bored, and he picked a new fight now with the courts.
Yeah. Yeah.
You go to the Ninth Circuit, and it's a disgrace. This was an Obama judge. And I'll tell you what, it's not going to happen like this anymore.
I could tell. That's the beginning of next season. That's what it sounds like. You know, I could tell you more, but you'll have to wait.
Coming
till
up after the
September
break,
season.
find out why we're not putting up with it.
Yeah, well, that's it exactly. I could tell you more, but
so he attacks a judge. He's not really part of the Ninth Circuit, and
no, of course not. It's a drive-by shooting.
He's an American-born. The reason?
I'm building a wall, okay? I'm building a wall.
He thinks he's a Mexican, so he's...
Okay. Yeah.
Trump, the dictator.
Beaten, and then we end up having to go to the Supreme Court like the travel ban, and we won. The Ninth Circuit, we're going to have to look at that. This was an Obama judge, and I'll tell you what, it's not going to happen like this anymore.
You know when the mosquitoes flying around you at night and you're trying to sleep and you're just thrashing out at the air. At least that's what I am, anyways. And the lights aren't on, you can't see anything, and this is what Trump is doing to anybody that comes after him.
He switches to attacking Roberts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll criticize judges. I have had horrible rulings. I've been treated very unfairly by this judge. Now, this judge is of Mexican heritage. I'm building a wall. Justice Roberts gave us Obamacare. Might as well be called Roberts Care. That judge has been a disaster in terms of everything we stand for.
He has done this with the media, and now we have a man who's dead and dissolved in acid. He's tried to play fast and loose with Jim Acosta, and Jim Acosta didn't do any favors to himself. When you're dealing with somebody who is as unhinged as Trump and his administration, you don't add more gasoline to the fire. You just start playing with him like a kitten plays with a, Anyway, so I really... the more every day that passes, the more nervous I get. Honestly, I don't know about you or anybody else, but he's just...
So is this a strategy to discredit the judiciary?
It's been going on forever. No collusion, no nothing. They've been finished.
A little reminder from Justice Roberts on impartiality.
We speak for the Constitution. That job obviously requires independence from the political branches.
Then he calls the Navy this week. Forgets who he's talking to.
Oh, no.
You probably see over the news what's happening in our southern border and our southern border territory. Large numbers of people, and in many cases we have no idea who they are, and in many cases they're not good people. We're doing very well in the southern border. We're very tough. We get a lot of bad court decisions from the Ninth Circuit, which has become a big thorn in our side. We always lose, and then you lose again and again, and then you hopefully win at the Supreme Court, which we've done. But it's a terrible thing when judges take over your protective services. What's going on in the region? How are they feeling about things? How are they feeling about trade? Because, trade for me is a very big subject all over. We've been taken advantage of for many, many years by bad trade deals. We don't have any good trade deals. How are you finding things in the region, Nick?
Mr. President, from our perspective out on the water, sir, we're seeing that there is an abundance of trade happening in the region. There are vessels moving through the Straits of Hormuz and across the Arabian Gulf on a daily basis, carrying cargo to and fro, and we don't see any issues in terms of trade right now, sir.
Okay. Well, you'll keep it that way, and we want to have good free trade. We also want to have fair deals where we can do well.
Oh. Did he just do a line of coke or something like that off the butt of a stripper before he made that phone call? I mean, really?
I think something's advancing.
Anyway,
Anyway,
well, honestly, I mean, I hats off to the professionalism of
absolutely.
the person in the Navy.
And sorry to him. And I'm a Canadian, okay? I'm sorry. I'd like to express my condolences to...
to all the men and women in the armed services. I mean, that in the States, I mean, that's just...
okay. And if that's not too much information, Khashoggi and a new version of U.S. moral authority.
What if the Crown Prince, speaking to you, the President of the United States, directly lied to you about
he told me that he had nothing to do with it. He told me that, I would say, maybe 5 times at different points.
But what if he's lying?
As recently as a few days ago.
Do you just live with it because you need him?
Well, will anybody really know? We do have an ally, and I want to stick with an ally that in many ways has been very good.
Wow. Well, yeah. Okay. Well, CIA's director, Gina Haspel, has said that they have a recording of the Saudi Crown Prince giving instructions to silence Jamal Khashoggi. So, yeah, this is something that they've had for over 6 weeks. They've had this thing.
President Trump, accessory after the fact.
The CIA doesn't say they did it. They do point out certain things, and in pointing out those things, you can conclude that maybe he did or maybe he didn't. But that was another part of the false reporting, because a lot of you said yesterday that they said he did it. Well, they didn't say that. They said he might have done it. That's a big difference. But they're vehemently denying it, and we have hundreds of thousands of jobs. Do people really want me to give up hundreds of thousands of jobs? And frankly, if we went by this standard, we wouldn't be able to have anybody as an ally, because look at what happens all over the world.
Like Canada.
Find us on Twitter @ThatArcher, our podcast page, tmi.twxnet.com. Rate the show on iTunes. It changes the way the show is listed.
Everybody should be boycotting when they go to Niagara Falls, the Maid of the Mist.
Because
they fired their Canadian crew.
Okay.
Because of Donald Trump and American jobs. The Maid of the Mist, I think it's number 5 and number 6 and number 7. Didn't know this, but they're American owned, and they go over the border between Canada and the States every time they're in the Niagara River. And the captain, who is from St. Catharines, Ontario, Rod McDonald, has been piloting the Maid of the Mist for 30 years and was unceremoniously fired along with the rest of the Canadian crew because U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services said that they weren't going to be getting H-2B visas to work just a couple of meters over in the Niagara River. So everybody was fired.
Wow.
So there you go. Boycott the Maid of the Mist.
Right. And so when they float into Canadian waters, is it up to Labour Canada to...
Yeah, it goes back and forth depending on where.
Maybe they should stay on their own side or something.
Yeah. Well, it's not a Canadian vessel, so... And it's owned by the States.
I'm just saying, will Canada retaliate by having it that if it floats into Canadian waters, they need work visas and permits to...
Mm-hmm. Yep. So anyway, so there you go. So each ship carries 600 people per trip. And in 2018, because they just finished the 2018 tourist season, there was 1.6 million people that took the trip. So time to boycott.
So the midterms, they're voting for U.S. Senate, governor, treasurers, secretary of state, and attorney general. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, pretty severe differences.
Yeah, and each and every one of them can be swayed by money, big interest, corporate interests. whatever. I mean, you always see this about movies and books and research articles and what have you about the United States and places like that, where if you have too much of a choice, is the judge really presiding from law, or are they presiding from a bias or influence? I mean, that's the thing that I walked away from in 2006, why I was really disgusted in our current system. It's all about it's pressure tactics, it's interest groups, it's powerful lobbyists, and I mean, look at the about face that the Ontario government, Conservative government, did this week when they abolished last week French language rights and what have you here in Ontario. Now Caroline Mulroney, I think she's the Attorney General for Ontario, is now the minister responsible for Francophone issues. That's a quick about face for a Conservative government. So, but like I said earlier on in the podcast, when you start taking away people's rights and how they self-identify, that's how the Nazis did it. That's how the Chinese communists are doing it right now, and that's how the Russians are doing it in Duarte in the Philippines, and what's going on in Hungary and Sweden and other so-called democracies around the world. You identify as a certain way, and then the government says, well, we don't recognize you. So it's the same thing with the populist vote down in the States, or other jurisdictions. You go, well, we got gun violence, or we have too many raccoons, or we have too many coyotes, So you're going after the fear factor, I think, always, or the heartstrings. Oh, we can make this area great again. We can bring back industry. We can lower tax rates. We can lower infrastructure rates, or it's the carrot versus the stick versus the fear kind of approach to politics. So when you try to figure out a populist vote, well, is that populist vote done on dramatics, histrionics, or is it done with pragmatic, okay, here are the numbers, this is what's happening? It's kind of like global warming and people believing it or not believing it.
There's been a bunch of weird things going on. The Chinese consulate in Karachi, Pakistan, attacked.
Yeah, I saw that at 5 o'clock this morning.
Yeah. They're mad at China's investment in infrastructure and stuff.
This is like the ant trying to kill a tiger or an elephant.
Picking another enemy. Good luck with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, China has built, I could be wrong in this, but I think they built a Himalayan mountain pass train network and highway network between China and Pakistan, as well as China and India, and China, where else was it? There's a couple of major infrastructure projects that they had done with those two countries. Because it's all to do with the Belt and Road Initiative that the Chinese Communist Party had decided on at their party congress about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I think it was.
Okay, the state of New York has given the go-ahead to go ahead and investigate the Trump Foundation. He's misused charitable assets. There's accusations.
Allegedly misused.
Misused charitable assets.
Allegedly.
Okay, can I finish? The charges include misused charitable assets, self-dealing, and campaign finance violations during the 2016 presidential campaign. You're very... And, the ruling was asking the question, can you go ahead with the civil charges against a president, and particularly for things he may have done before he went into office? And one thinks of the Paula Jones prosecution happened while Clinton was in office, and we know where that led.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course he can be investigated for his. Okay. I don't know if you noticed this one. I bet you did, but I was surprised to read in the New York Times, Toronto. A quote from the article: "Some say the videos have expressed a strain of toxic masculinity sewn into the anti-male Catholic school, reminiscent of the debate in the United States that sprang up around the confirmation of Justice Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court."
Yeah, I think toxic masculinity has been around since the beginning of, well, bipeds. If what I just heard on Quirks and Quarks today, the CBC Science show, humanoids have of both genders or all genders or however the people identify. They've been showing that some males have less male hormone, testosterone, than are in female. We're learning so much about hormones and what it means to be whatever gender.
Well, I think it's pretty simple. We don't want to say it. It's that human males are just like male cats.
Anything with testosterone.
They're just as annoying and controlled by their biochemicals. And, until we start spaying all males at birth, we're going to have problems. But
no, we're not going to have problems. It's just growing up and being an adult. It's just taking responsibility. Dude, it's all in which the way we're socialized.
Well, I'm just worried that the majority of the murders, the majority of the rapes, the majority of the crimes, the majority of the it's always male.
No, and I agree, and I'll be the first to male bash. I have no problems with male bashing, even when I'm hanging out with people that are toxically masculine and they start on their verbal vomits. I'll be like, really, dude? That's not cool.
There is a fine line between blaming it on biochemistry and not requiring education and training.
And again, as I said before, and I agree with you on that, I think we're just going around in circles now. It's all about socialization. We have to recognize it comes from biochemistry, but it's also socialization. So you go to some countries around the world that are toxically paternalistic or are male.
But why don't we hear stories from girls' schools about hazing and boofing?
Yeah, you do. It's called, I think there was a movie that they spoofed. There was a spoof a couple of years ago called Mean Girls. So, it's just as toxic and with gals. Yeah, well, give it time, man. Give it time. This male hazing stuff and what have you. This has been going on for hundreds of years. So, this is old news.
Well, is that school as creepy as Kavanaugh's? We did talk about how
all schools are creepy.
Okay. I can't help myself. Boofing.
What is that?
That's the one thing I can't get out of my head. Am I really to believe that rich kids were ingesting alcohol anally at parties? And that's not embarrassing to them at the time as teenagers in their peer group?
I have honestly, until you just mentioned that, I have never heard of that. And
boofing is what Kavanaugh, in his yearbook, he writes, "Have you tried boofing yet?" Exclamation mark. I think we did cover it in the show. Boofing. I personally think that boofing meant locking a girl in a room and a bunch of guys teaming her. But we were led to believe by his testimony that boofing was... It's like that Devil's Triangle. He gave one version of what it meant, and the rest of the population seems to assume it's some kind of three-way where two guys and a girl are having sex.
Well, nothing surprises me anymore, and I don't even know if if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But
But
I'm
you
just
didn't
not.
catch the boofing from the Kavanaugh thing?
Man, I'm not. Again, I'm starting to be, and I've been saying this since last summer. I'm really getting tired of Trump and the United States and all the problems that are going on. This is like having a bad relationship and you just can't get out of it for whatever reasons, and having to talk about it. I don't even have the energy anymore to be angry, quite frankly.
Right. There was another mass killing in the United States, Alabama.
See, I didn't even know that. I just totally turned myself off of that whole thing. There you go.
And I think it happened Thursday night.
Really? Okay.
And what was interesting was...
It was a mass killing?
The guy shot a few people at the mall, and then some police officers responded and shot him. But now the news is an armed man killed by an Alabama officer likely didn't fire the rounds that injured 2 others in a mall, police say. The suspect remains at large. So it's looking like, because the one thing was interesting as the news broke was that at this mall where somebody opened fire and shot a couple teenagers, I think it was, and then police responded, they noted in the original story that a lot of the other patrons at the mall had their guns out. And now, a day later, we find out that the guy who was killed by the Alabama first responders was probably just one of those people at the mall whose answer is to just pull out your gun. I mean, that's what Trump said, was if everybody had guns. Well, now this looks like a case where pulling out your gun gets you shot.
Welcome to the United States. Do you have anything to declare?
Okay, I'm just saying. There's another Facebook scandal now. They hired a lobbying company that pushed negative stories about Facebook's critics.
Mm-hmm.
That guy keeps digging his own grave, I think. So it turns out Saudi Arabia, the whole reason, I think now, Trump really wants to preserve his friendly ties with Saudi Arabia. If it's really about deal making, well, one of those deals has been the push that has been not so secret for quite a long time, Saudi Arabia's pursuit of nuclear technology. And then we would have to trust that they wouldn't use some of the materials generated by the production, either of fuel or the waste that then creates plutonium, wouldn't fall into a weapons program. But in the light of the prince's morals and ethics, can they be trusted? Another little headline popped up. Westinghouse has marked its production of 1,000 fuel assemblies for VVER and 1,440 type reactors in southern Ukraine. And I heard about this before, and I just haven't had the time to look deeper into it in light of the too much information. But some of these deals that I thought Flynn and Manafort and others were actually involved with as it affected the Soviets was that in a way Westinghouse is competing to sell fuel assemblies to Russian reactors. These VVER 440s and 1000s, etc., if you look at the countries that they've been installed in and the countries that plan to build more of them, it's entirely Russian reactors. And here's Westinghouse, who recently bankrupted, still seems to be in the game. I mean, this is exactly the mechanics of the kind of deal-making that would have been, I'm pretty sure, part of this whole scandal with Russia.
Yeah, I mean, it's as clear as milk, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I don't even know anymore if the information that we're all receiving is even real.
Okay, here's another one.
So, I mean, it's just, you're chasing snowflakes at this point.
Ooh. Well,
I'm not giving you a lot today, man. I'm not giving you a lot today.
More news in nuclear. We just found out there's an estimate for the cost of refurbishing Unit 6 at Bruce. And
Unit 6 at Bruce, okay.
the way the headline read, it was Independent Electrical Supply Operator, ESO. And it was just the way they opened the article with these words, independent, when there's simply nothing independent about nuclear in Ontario. All the reactors in Ontario are owned by the provincial government, and in the case of Bruce, they lease them from the government. It's always unclear where all this money's coming from, but now there's an estimate. The contractor, and every time there's ever been a refurbishment, it's never been on time, on budget. So it's really just they probably charged for the estimate. I'll bet you they got paid, $500 million just to make the estimate. Anyway, $2.1 billion to refurbish Unit 6 at Bruce. So we're going to have to see how that goes. But you have to remember, there's 8 units at Bruce. Where are these tens of billions of dollars coming from? And there's also one-time charges. They always do this. Whenever they refurb, they build a whole plethora, a whole complex of new buildings. Mm-hmm. And then there's going to be hidden things they find when they start digging, because they don't keep records of where they bury stuff at nuclear plants in Canada. Mm-hmm. And it's just going, it's just going to, yeah. Anyway, so I just thought I'd point it out so that they're far enough in that plan, rather than close them down, to refurbish them, and just to do one reactor, $2.1 billion, plus a whole bunch of other support buildings, etc. So, well, nice to know there's a lot of money.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's definitely, I don't think we'll get to the bottom of nuclear, no pun intended, for a while, but it's definitely, we as humans are tearing each other apart, and thank God I don't have kids. So, something a little more positive, I'm just going to spin this on its end and try to get back to where we were at the beginning of the show with some more positive and uplifting news. From Washington, Reuters, some 115 years after the first powered flight, scientists have developed a radical new approach towards flying in the form of a small, lightweight, and virtually noiseless plane that gets airborne with no moving parts, such as propellers or turbine blades. Scientists and engineers at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, on Wednesday described successful flight tests at an indoor campus gymnasium of an unmanned airplane powered not by engines that burn fossil fuels, but by ion wind propulsion, also called electro-aerodynamic thrust. The aircraft, called version 2 EAD airframe, or V2, weighs only 5.4 pounds, or 2.45 kilograms, with a wingspan of 16.5 feet, or 5 meters. So what they've been able to do, which was just absolutely incredible, I'll just read you the quote. "This is the first time that an airplane without moving parts has flown," said MIT aerospace engineer Steve Barrett, who drew inspiration from the fictional shuttlecraft from Star Trek. Electrical field strength near an array of thin filaments called emitters at the front of the wing ionizes air. Moved and charged molecules called ions are created. These positively charged ions are attracted to negatively charged structures on the plane called collectors. As they move towards the collectors, the ions collide with air molecules, transferring energy to them. This creates a flow of air that gives the airplane thrust. Time will tell whether these test flights at DuPont Athletic Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts will become historic, like the 1903 test flights of the first airplane by Wilbur and Orville Wright at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, and engineers readily acknowledge the V2 prototype is inefficient and limited, but this could lead to big things. The V2 flew around 200 feet or 60 meters, typically less than 6.5 meters or 2 feet off the ground. It didn't have any moving control parts like rudders or elevators or propulsion systems. So When you consider that planes, their turbines, their jet turbines move at 10,000 rotations per second, I mean, that's just absolutely incredible. I mean, that's just when you think about it. So that's what they're working on right now. So very Star Trek-ish.
Yeah.
I thought you'd be interested in that.
No, it's very cool.
Yeah. Mini brains and ion propulsion, I guess. Would you call it ion propulsion?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think a difference would be that in space, maybe you'd have to make more ions because it doesn't have molecules of stuff in space to collide with to create that force. But it seems to work in dense air in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
I like the idea.
Yeah. This is and when I heard about this a couple of hours ago in Quirks and Quartz, they were talking to the lead scientist. And one thing I would have liked to have asked him, and maybe you can answer this. Again, my chemistry is next to nothing. But they said that they were worried about it possibly producing too much ozone.
Yeah.
So
it's going to positively charge stuff in its wake.
Okay.
Because it's shooting positively charged ions towards that negative collector. With the U.S. military on the southern border and with that phone call Trump gave to
that was embarrassing. Yeah.
The Navy.
Well, Mr. Trump, out here on the waters, we don't seem to be having any of these problems. There's a lot of ships going back and forth. I was waiting to hear a hang-up from Mr. Trump, Oh, shit, got this wrong.
It took 4 seconds for the Navy guy to reply, but...
you could just see the people in the room on board the deck or in the office of the ship just laughing their ass off. It's kind of like Stalin making a joke and nobody's laughing and everybody's kicking each other under the table to start laughing.
But it does seem like the U.S. military now has taken up right-wing politics in the United States. Trump keeps avoiding Mueller. Apparently Mueller has more questions. It's just funny that Trump will meet with Kanye, but not with Mueller.
Well, they're so-called entertainers, right? So, well, Kanye's an entertainer as opposed to Trump, but isn't there somebody who in Trump's circle who is now
okay?
Who the hell was it? They're making a plea deal. They're making a plea deal with Mueller.
There's a pre-sentence report for Flynn, and then it's Jerome Corsi, whose clip we used in last week's episode.
Yeah, that's him. That's who we're referring to.
Yeah, he's now, because he was saying he expected to be arrested. So he's singing. So all the people around Roger Stone are singing.
Mm-hmm. Surprise, surprise, surprise.
But I keep saying, any day now, the Mueller report, we're going to... So I don't know. I don't know how long this is going to go on for.
This is like a toxic dump.
It's a cliffhanger.
You're just waiting for it to explode and just...
It's a cliffhanger. It's a show. The America Show. Brought to you by...
yeah, well...
Refill your coffee or...
Well, and that's it. I mean, we are hardly a civilized society if we can't do that, right? So, if we want to conduct ourselves civilly, right.
Oh, who's he?
Oh, he's the frustrated older human. Yes.
Maybe you could say, I'll take Khashoggi sliced and run him through the garden.
Isn't that a little too soon?
Do it.
Oh no! I've just drawn a blank, man. I'm having a brain
in
fart.
that accent, dude.
Find us on Twitter @thatarcher. Send us an email, archer@twxnet.com. For guest links and contact info, visit our podcast page, tmi.twxnet.com. Find us on Android and Apple Podcast apps. Subscribe and rate the show on iTunes.
I'm I'm Dave Archer in Toronto.
And I'm Ian Stolberg in Ottawa.